They thought it was over, didn't they? The good guys win, the bad guy gets locked up, the credits roll. They thought locking up Harold Mathers, throwing away the key, meant the nightmare buried alive under that farmhouse was gone for good. But evil. Man, you learn one thing. It doesn't die just because some judge bangs a gavel. It festers, like a wound left untended in the dark. It settles in, gets comfortable. It waits, patiently, in the shadows. And sometimes, when you least expect, it spreads its nasty tendrils. Lily tried. God, she really tried to live a normal life after they finally pulled her out of that hellhole. Doctors in their fancy offices with their diplomas on the wall said she was free, said the healing would come. But how do you unlearn the darkness that's been etched into your bones for 2 decades? How do you just forget the feeling of cold chains, the echo of screams that weren't your own, the suffocating weight of the silence? It stays with you, man, like a second skin you can't shed. She was given a new identity, a fresh start. A new, small apartment in a town miles away from Redwood Hollow, somewhere she hoped the shadows wouldn't find her. But the shadows, they got long memories. They followed her everywhere she went, lingered in the corners of her new place, especially at night, when the world outside went quiet and your thoughts got loud. That's when she heard it. Just a faint, almost imagined sound at first. A knock on the wall beside her bed. Just a soft tap, like someone testing if the wall was hollow. It started about 6 weeks after Harold was finally locked away, the key thrown into some dusty evidence drawer. Lily said she began to hear scratching. Not outside, like branches against the siding. This was inside, in the walls of her apartment, like something was trapped in there trying to claw its way out. At first, she tried to tell herself it was just the old building settling. Or maybe mice. Yeah, it had to be mice, she thought. But it wasn't rats. The scratching, it had a rhythm to it. A pattern that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Long. A pause. Then short. Short. Another pause. Then long again. Over and over and over, like some kind of messed up Morse code. She started writing it down in a notebook, trying to make sense of it, to find some logical explanation. Tried to ignore it, block it out with the TV or music, until one night, she couldn't take it anymore. Her heart pounding in her chest, she finally reached out and knocked back on the wall. Just 3 quick taps. The scratching stopped. Just like that. Silence. Then, a voice. So faint, she almost thought she'd imagined it. But it was there. A dry, raspy whisper that seemed to come from right inside the wall. Still think you're free? While the cops were finally clearing out Harold Mathers' creepy old farmhouse, getting ready to bulldoze it and maybe salt the earth, a maintenance worker found something tucked away in the dusty attic. Up under the eaves, hidden behind some old insulation. A box, just a plain cardboard box taped shut. Looked like it had been up there for years. Inside were tapes, dozens of them, old VHS tapes, unlabeled. The plastic cases were cracked and yellowed with age. Mold grew on them in fuzzy green patches. They looked like they were almost completely destroyed by time and neglect. But one of them, somehow, one of them still played. The worker plugged it into an old VCR they found in the house, curious despite himself. It wasn't footage of Lily. The cops had already gone through all that, hadn't found anything else. This was of another girl. Younger than an adult, older than the kids they rescued from the cellar. Someone older, tied to the same damn chair Lily had described. The same chair in that cold, concrete room. Same single flickering light bulb casting long, dancing shadows. Same feeling of dread that seemed to seep out of the screen. And then, a voice. Low and menacing, whispering from behind the camera. "You're not real until I make you scream." Her name. They eventually figured out her name from old missing persons reports. It was Miranda Hale, disappeared back in 1987, 8 years before Lily was ever even taken by that monster. Harold's basement, that prison. It had been in use for a very, very long time. You remember that wall in the cellar? The one Lily said had those desperate claw marks all over it? The police, after everything, decided to finally break through it. Curiosity, maybe, or maybe a gnawing feeling that they hadn't uncovered everything. What they found wasn't just another room, another small concrete box of horror. It was a tunnel. Long, narrow, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. And it looked like it had been dug out with bare hands. The earth walls were rough and uneven, dirt packed tight. It led deep, deep beneath the surrounding forest, past thick, gnarled tree roots that snaked through the soil, past solid stone that had been chipped away with sheer determination. And at the end of it, after what must have been yards and yards of claustrophobic darkness, a small, crudely made wooden door looked like something out of a nightmare. Behind it? Not another prison cell. This chamber was different. Fresher. The air wasn't stale and damp. Clean. Almost sterile. Prepared. Like someone had been working on it recently. Waiting. For someone else to arrive. But here's the thing that makes your blood run cold. Harold was locked up tight in prison. Had been for months. So who in the hell had been digging that tunnel? And who had been preparing that second room? As Lily started to feel a little safer in her new life, away from that cursed town, the memories, they started coming back in flashes. Not always clear, but sharp and disturbing. Voices. Not just Harold's. Footsteps upstairs in the farmhouse that didn't always sound like his heavy boots. Conversations. Muffled, indistinct words that didn't belong to just Harold talking to himself. She remembered him often going upstairs in the middle of the night, leaving her chained in the dark and talking to someone. But when she'd ask him, her voice weak and desperate, who it was, he'd just smile that creepy, tight smile and say, his eyes glinting in the dim light, "That's the man who taught me, little bird." Back at Harold's house, hidden away, in a false panel in his dusty old roll-top safe, the investigators found a journal. Leather-bound, the pages brittle with age. The entries inside were deeply disturbing, filled with the twisted thoughts of a monster. But it wasn't just because of what they said, the depravity that dripped from every word. It was how they were written. Each entry, going back decades, was signed with a different name, different handwriting even, different tone, different turns of phrase, like someone else, something else, was writing through him, using Harold as a vessel for their own darkness. One page, written in a spidery hand and signed Silas, read, "The first was my daughter, a sweet little thing. The whispers started early with her. The second was her friend, came sniffing around like a curious little mouse. The third was the girl who came knocking on the door that stormy night looking for shelter. Foolish thing. And the fourth, she still talks to me in her sleep, even after all these years. Such a strong little bird. Underneath that entry were 5 more blank pages, but at the top of each page a date was carefully written. All of them in the future. Years into the future. After Lily's story broke, after Redwood Hollow became known for the horror it had hidden, residents started talking, remembering things they'd brushed off as just their imagination, and they began reporting strange sightings around town. A man, tall and unsettlingly thin, always wearing a long gray coat that seemed too heavy for the weather, seen near the edge of the woods that surrounded the Mathers property, always standing perfectly still, like a statue, always watching the town, never moving, never interacting, just there. Some folks swore they'd seen him in the town where Lily was trying to rebuild her life, standing across the street from her new apartment building. Others said they'd seen him at the Redwood Hollow Hospital, lurking near the children's therapy room where the rescued kids were trying to heal. Just staring through the glass, his face obscured by the shadows of his coat. One nurse, a young woman named Maria, said he even smiled at her once. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that felt wrong. But when they checked the security footage, later, trying to figure out who this creepy guy was, no one was there. The camera showed an empty hallway. The 3 children rescued from that underground nightmare. They were deeply traumatized, as you can imagine. They started seeing therapists, trying to process the unimaginable horrors they had endured, and they started drawing things, disturbing things, pictures of dark holes in the walls, eyes peering out from behind cracked mirrors, pale, skeletal hands reaching through cracks in the floorboards, their young minds trying to make sense of the darkness they had known. The boys, the youngest, wouldn't speak a single word, just stared blankly ahead. But he did something else, something really strange. He would constantly tap his fingers against any surface, the table, his leg, the wall, in strange, unsettling rhythms. Tap. A pause. Tap, tap. Another pause. Tap, tap, tap. Over and over, like it was a language all his own. A linguist, someone who specialized in ancient languages and codes, was brought in to see if they could understand what the boy was doing. He said the rhythms. They eerily resembled patterns found in an ancient coded language, something long forgotten. How could a child who had never known the outside world, who had never learned to speak, somehow know a code that no child should ever know? Twisted in a silent scream, a look of absolute terror frozen on his features. And blood. Dark, thick blood was leaking from his nose and ears. He had used his own fingernails, raw and broken, to carve something into the concrete wall beside his bed. Just one word, scratched deep and desperate. He's next. They buried Harold in an unmarked grave out in the middle of nowhere. Didn't even put a headstone. Just wanted him and his evil gone. But the evil he opened up in Redwood Hollow, it didn't die with him. You can't just bury something that dark. The cellar was sealed, the trap door bolted shut. The old farmhouse itself? They burned it too. The ground, let the ashes scatter in the wind, hoping to cleanse the land. But sometimes, late at night, when the air is still and the moon is full, people walking by the empty field where the house once stood say they still hear something. Tapping, soft, rhythmic, like someone, or something, is knocking from the other side, trying to get out, and in the silence between each tap, A faint, chilling whisper carried on the breeze. I'm still here. The end. Or, maybe, the beginning.